leadership. I wasn't there when Mayfield was started in 1964 or whatever it was, but have been there the last few years where I focus on consumer, mobile, and also kind of newer areas, fringy areas like drones and body hacking and next-gen mindfulness and meditation and things like that. Originally had grown up programming and playing a lot of video games. That was one of my first passions, and that kind of led me into my interest in sort of gamification, playing a whole lot of video games and thinking, how come I don't spend as much time optimizing my real life as I do trying to min-max my character in Bard's Tale? Oh, sorry. Feel better? Anyway. So I grew up playing a lot of video games, and then for a while wanted to be a musician and then an actor and get to do it on the side, but then kind of fell into venture capital where I've been investing in areas like games, gamification, co-founded this company called Basis before wearables was a term, recently sold into Intel. Been doing a lot as a body hacker myself and doing quantified self things, consumerization of health, drones, areas like that. And lately I've been thinking a lot about sort of using technology for self-improvement, self-awareness, self-development in realms even like meditation and mindfulness and empathy generation. So some more out there sort of things using the standard stuff.
And you're a musician.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear what people do outside of their day-to-day. Just tell us a little bit about what kind of music and how you got into that and what you're playing in bands currently.
Like the product of all fierce Asian tiger parents, I grew up playing piano and violin, not necessarily by choice. So I spent many hours doing that, and then I saw Back to the Future when I'm Tim Chang with Mayfield Fund. We're an early stage venture capital firm here in the Valley. One of the original venture funds actually around the birth of the venture capital industry in the 60s. And so we're in our fourth generation of leadership. I wasn't there when Mayfield was started in 1964 or whatever it was, but have been there the last few years where I focus on consumer, mobile, and also kind of newer areas, fringy areas like drones and body hacking and next-gen mindfulness and meditation and things like that. Originally had grown up programming and playing a lot of video games. That was one of my first passions, and that kind of led me into my interest in sort of gamification, playing a whole lot of video games and thinking, how come I don't spend as much time optimizing my real life as I do trying to min-max my character in Bard's Tale? Oh, sorry. Feel better? Anyway. So I grew up playing a lot of video games, and then for a while wanted to be a musician and then an actor and get to do it on the side, but then kind of fell into venture capital where I've been investing in areas like games, gamification, co-founded this company called Basis before wearables was a term, recently sold into Intel. Been doing a lot as a body hacker myself and doing quantified self things, consumerization of health, drones, areas like that. And lately I've been thinking a lot about sort of using technology for self-improvement, self-awareness, self-development in realms even like meditation and mindfulness and empathy generation. So some more out there sort of things using the standard stuff.
And you're a musician.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear what people do outside of their day-to-day. Just tell us a little bit about what kind of music and how you got into that and what you're playing in bands currently.
Like the product of all fierce Asian tiger parents, I grew up playing piano and violin, not necessarily by choice. So I spent many hours doing that, and then I saw Back to the Future when I was in high school and said, Marty McFly, he plays guitar, gets the girl, saves the world, I want to be that guy. And so, to my parents' chagrin, I quit the piano and picked up guitar and spent hours and hours. This is all pre-YouTube, mind you, so I wore out tape decks, rewind, play, trying to figure out Van Halen songs and AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, that sort of thing. And then embarked upon just a string of bands ever since high school, right? And so kind of really pursued music passionately, whether it was rock or jazz or then funk, R&B, hip hop, all these sorts of things. Stayed with it. So I like to say I've been a musician much longer than I've been a BC. Been able to perform with bands the past few years in the Bay Area. So my wife and I are in, I think, 3 bands right now. One of them is a Punjabi hip-hop collective called Black Mahal with Vijay Chopra from BSC Consulting. Awesome PR exec, by the way. He does like half our portfolio work. Great PR guy for startups. And then a tech cover band called Coverflow. You might have seen us at TechCrunch and things like that. We just played Little Kids Rock last night, and thanks to a lot of you guys who were there, Cindy, Antonio, we raised almost $86,000 for music education. And then a side project called Rainbow Party, which is sort of a live EDM group. And so we've been figuring out how to play things like, Skrillex and Avicii and Knife Party and Cruella and stuff like that with digital instruments instead of more traditional analog instruments.
Well, that'll provide a great segue, into one of the next area I wanted to talk about, which was the VC founder relationship. And maybe this is a totally random segue, but you get together with a band and you have to work together, you have to learn how each other work, and tell me what it's like to start with a new group of people in a band, and then maybe we can roll that into just talking about the VC entrepreneur relationship.
That's a great topic. So here's something kind of inspiring and depressing at the same time. In Coverflow, my bandmates are Christian Segerstraw founded Playfish, and then he crushed it on Supercell. Phil Kaplan, who founded Fuck Company, then Flippy, and then a bunch of other things which are all profitable. Ethan Beard, early at Facebook, ran Platform. Prashant Floria, Google, Facebook, and then just helped sell Flurry. So these are all guys who don't work. I'm the only schmuck who has a job. And so these guys basically work because they want to, and it's fun. And it's really interesting. Oh, and Raj Kapoor, who was a VC before and then founded FitMob, right, which we backed. So they're working because they love it and they want to. But meanwhile, their schedule is incredibly flexible to band practice from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m., say. And so it's really interesting to hang out with them all the time. And nothing makes you feel more depressed than when all your bandmates don't have to work because they have $100 million in the bank and you're sitting there slaving away, right? But it's inspiring too because they are the first to admit they don't know why they made it. They were just right time, right place, and they're the last to ever think that I'm smarter or better positioned than anybody else. They're often the first to say, right place, right time. I don't know. And it's kind of interesting to keep that in mind because so many of us get caught up in this, we're successful because, we're smarter, we work harder, but there's so much luck involved in this, kind of galactic lottery we call the Valley here. And it's really important to keep that in mind. The band also serves as a vehicle to, keep investors humble, but also, I think, remind entrepreneurs that there's this kind of false dichotomy or this antagonism between investors and entrepreneurs, when the truth is that distinction doesn't really matter in today's world. Most founders and entrepreneurs I know are angel investing. Most venture guys I know have a side startup or app on the side anyway. So we're all wearing every hat now, so everybody's doing everything. So I think that false antagonism doesn't sort of need to be there.
And how do you approach the relationship with the entrepreneur, especially someone you've just met? How do you build that? And I guess the obvious one is what are you looking for, but also just coaching. Do you think I can coach, or is it like I got to take what I'm meeting here and work with that, and just the development of that relationship?
It's a great question because I bet you've got a lot of views on this too, but I'll be honest, a year ago, I was kind of burned out and depressed in the sense that there's so much deal activity and so many companies to meet. And my operating principle has always been just don't be a dick, and because there's a lot of investors who are, frankly. And so the thing is, if you're trying to be helpful and take every meeting and give as much free advice and everything as you can, you have no time left. And the problem is word spreads, and then your inbox is flooded with more requests. And I don't like to say no, I like to help people. But when you have literally 180 emails a day saying, can we get coffee, which is code for I need advice, I need funding, I need business plan help, it's hard to know where to draw that line. And so I found myself really burned out because I was trying to take every meeting and I was slicing them down to even 30 and 15-minute coffee slots, trying to cover everybody when I realized I can't do this. I remember looking at my calendar one day saying, oh my God, somebody kill me now. I don't know how I'm gonna get through my day. I know Reid Hoffman is famous for doing this as well. He never says no, and he's a machine and takes every meeting. But the issue with that is, I'm not sure that actually services people better. So what I've kind of come more to the realization of is focus really helps you with sanity. I mean, entrepreneurs always know that focus is what saves a company. As an investor, I think focus keeps you sane because just pouring through AngelList every day with all the deals going through there, you go nuts trying to chase everything. So one of the surest-fire ways to kill yourself as an investor is to chase every shiny new object. And at least what worked for me was just two things. thematic investing, and then people-based investing. So on the themes, I try to have a major and a minor. And a major is something that's kind of, already big today, like SaaS or IoT or mobile platforms or something. And then the fun stuff are minors, and minors can be way out there, like, food 2.0, fat-grown muscles, whatever it is, something that really is a passion area of yours that people aren't really talking about yet. And you kind of plant a flag in it, and it gives you this opportunity to search out folks in that space or incubate it. So that's sort of the fun part. You get to get out and play versus that you also see, like me, literally 1,000 deals a year, and you can do maybe one or two of them, right? And so there's that screening work, but there's also the inventive part of it. The team part, I found the simplest filter for me is really just good people, and I define that now as would we have fun working together? Do you have good chemistry and trust? Because I don't want to look over your shoulder. I don't want to second guess you. I want to be there when you need me, and I basically have the standing offer. Whenever I can help, let me know. Otherwise, I want to be out of your hair. I don't want to tell you how you do your job. I don't want to try to replace you like some firms will do. It's more sort of use me if you need me. But here's the irony of it. After almost 12, 13 years of doing this, the companies that often did the best never needed my help. Even though I wanted to help them. I'd call them and be like, can I help? And they'd be like, nah, we got it. And so they never talked to me. And then they'd call me and say, we're going IPO, we're getting acquired. And it was the ones that needed help every day. I really found a lot of gratification helping and coaching, but I realized if you need that much coaching, maybe it might not be the right deal as an investor to take on.
Do you think there's an inconsistency between an entrepreneur's view of it's not working and we absolutely have to make it work, and an investor's view of it's not working and you're incredibly bright and you have great ideas and maybe it's time to think about moving to the next idea?
Oh, so that's the pivot question, right? Pivot or even team changes, right?
Yeah.
One of the bars I look for is extreme self-awareness, and the dream situation is it's the founder who comes to you before the board meeting happens and says, hey man, I think the initial premise isn't working, I think we need to pivot. Or, I think I've reached my scalability, I think we need to find another CEO who's even more superpowered than me to take it to the next level. That's the ideal situation. We tend to bet on people. We want to ride the train all the way with you. So one of the things in our debriefs after you finish pitching us, number one question besides valuation and how big can this be is always, how scalable is this team? Do they know how far they can scale? Are they self-aware enough that they would know when they would come to you and say, you know what, I think I'm good up to 30 people. Beyond that, we should bring in additional world-class folks. Part of that sometimes around, this is my baby, I need to control it. So I always love kind of asking people before we close a deal, are you doing this to get rich or to get famous? Because those are actually two different drivers. Sometimes if you really want to get rich, sometimes you're not the best person to take that pie all the way to the moon, right? Versus if you want to be famous, you want to be on the cover of that TechCrunch article. You want your picture in the lights, and you will never want to give that up. So it's a really interesting thing to ask yourself, why are you doing what you do, right?
And do you think that the team can share the load versus a CEO being able to do it all or needing to do it all? When you meet an entrepreneur that has a clear deficiency in an area, just how do you think about that?
The number one thing is, does that CEO entrepreneur know that they have a blind spot? And because they do, they'll hire for it, right? What I always tell people is, as a founder, you want to build a rock star team that would enable you to literally go to networking events or play Tetris in your office all day, and knowing that things would absolutely get built. If you're really good, you hire people who can kick your ass, because then your team will, your company will only rise. The worst ones are when you kind of hire people who look just like you, or you want people who are kind of like yes people, because you're never going to rise. Then you're going to be stuck and having to do everything yourself. So always hire people who are better than you. It's kind of like when you play sports on a team. You want to play with people who are way better than you, because that forces you to level up.
I heard something great from a co-board member, which was advice to a CEO who was doing it for the first time. He said, you got to understand that you are the average of the 5 people around you.
Exactly.
And I thought that was and it just resonated, if that's the case, which seems pretty legitimate, then I try to get the best 5 people on my team. Let's see, what question I wanted this is just maybe a personal question as a VC to VC. How do you think about allocating your time between working with your existing investments and looking at new things specifically, and then doing the sort of broad research areas that you love, but may not be a today investment opportunity?
That's probably the toughest thing for every VC to figure out. And all of us, we have a different style because your investing style is an extension of your personality, just like your startup is an extension of your personality as a founder. So we all prioritize and allocate different things. Some of us are drawn to themes, like specific investment thesis ideas. Others are drawn towards a cohort of people that we hang out with, right? Those 5 people, the average. Others are drawn to geographies, or by stage, or by traction. What I find is number 1 priority is existing portfolio companies. They always deserve the most time. Those are the children that you are already married to, so you've got to prioritize them. Ideally, you have a mix of companies that are really early stage, but also maybe some that are more mature that need different kind of help, or even less help altogether. And then there's a big chunk of a VC's time that is screening, and screening is, again, let's get coffee, or I got a deal, and you're trying to process literally 1,000 deals a year per person, and trying to see which ones to focus on. And the pace of deals goes faster than ever before. And then whatever time you can carve out to go do the proactive work. Something I found in this job is the deals you really, really want, you have to go chase them and sell them and knock on their door, as opposed to the ones trying to pitch you. And so that requires a lot of time for proactive hunting, as well as kind of thesis and theme idea development. And if you're not careful, your time will easily get chewed up by kind of surfing through Angel List, or kind of just cold call emails, or cold calls and emails that come in over the transom saying, oh, I got a deal for you to look at, or just kind of chasing another shiny object. So these days, I would say it's sort of 40% existing portfolio, 40% screening kind of things that are coming and being referred in, and then 20% trying to be proactively outbound on things. That's the ideal, but it never really plays out that way.
What, if anybody in this room came and sat down to get a coffee, or in your partnership for the first time with one of you or another partner or so, is how long do you want a slide deck? And do you want them to focus on how big the market is, or pull out the product in the first minute and show it to you?
Generally, you don't need super long slide decks. I've seen awesome slide decks that are no more than 10 to 12 slides. Because what you're really trying to nail is, well, I guess I kind of call it the 3 T's, but there's either team, basically, we were the founders of GitHub. All right, I'm going to write you a check, even if it's a pizza shop. And then there's, traction. I'm 22, I haven't done anything that's of note per se before, but I'm getting, 100,000 actives per week without any spend, and the repeat rate, it's becoming a habitual usage by the week. That's the traction part. And then there's sort of the theme that there's a very novel kind of technology or a new business model or thesis that's kind of exciting there. So it's usually one of those 3 that you kind of look for.
Yeah. And do you like to see the whole team, or do you want to see in a small early company, is it everybody, or you want to have somebody come in and give you the run through?
Usually the first meeting, just the founder or a couple of co-founders, 2 or 3 co-founders is often enough. Yeah. Later on for the follow-up meetings, you want to get a sense of bench strength, and that's when you want to meet the other CXOs and VPs and those sorts of folks.
I talked to another VC who had done an analysis of their portfolio, and the conventional wisdom, as I had always thought about it, was repeat entrepreneurs, people you've worked with before, drive not a majority, but a disproportionate part of the success. And they found just the opposite was true. And I'm just curious, if you've done that analysis, what do you think about that?
We did that analysis too. And at first we thought it's repeat entrepreneurs just for enterprise stuff. That still kind of plays true for things that are intense sales cycle or infrastructure stuff. It's hard to fund 21-year-olds to do a semiconductor company because you can't bootstrap that. But on consumer, it's almost always first-time entrepreneurs because they have such fresh thinking on approaches, particularly for things that are social or digital media, or things that might not have immediate business models, but are all about engagement and getting user behavior change. then, even on the enterprise side, to your point, we found that a lot of times first-time entrepreneurs are often hungrier than the repeat ones. But there's a specific filter for enterprise first-time entrepreneurs. They might have been like a VP or kind of a CXO, second in charge at somewhere else, and then they were ready to level up to be the first-time CEO. So that could work there as well. The most dangerous actually is sometimes the second-time entrepreneur that had a really quick first win. Because sometimes you don't learn as much from an accidental sort of overnight success as you do from getting scars on your back from the first one. So an ideal world would be repeat entrepreneur on number 3. 1 win, 1 fail, scars on their back, and a lot of self-awareness for number 3.
How hard is that? Yeah, that's good. And what about, and again, I don't know how, I hope this is relevant to this group, but when you are working with young companies and thinking about, okay, we're an investor, I come from one perspective, how do you build out that advisory group, particularly as you start adding additional board members, which is a deeper relationship than just an advisor relationship. I mean, it's kind of it's not a marriage, but it's a longer term commitment.
Yeah. That's a great question. Advisory boards are awesome tools for early stage companies, and we'll always advise our founders to start thinking about building them from day one. And I always say, go for the gusto. Don't just ask your buddies or your friends of friends who are advisors. If you had a dream team, you could get anybody, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, kind of start from there and then work backwards on who you can get to, because you're setting the bar really high. And the other thing is advisory boards are also kind of like stealthy ways of recruiting, because you might be auditioning somebody to be your next SVP or CMO or something, and it might take an advisory coffee meeting first to hook them in. And ideally, if they fall in love with it and they say, actually, can I be more than an advisor? Because sometimes it's hard for really early stage companies to go poach that person out of a killer company. And so an advisory, kind of coffee meeting might be a easier way to couch it. Because you don't have the funds and the traction yet to go out and say, I want to go poach, the VP of product from Pinterest. But if you poach them potentially as an advisor, the more you work with them, sometimes that marriage does happen.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit more about the areas you're actively looking now? I mean, obviously you've had great success in gaming with Playdom and Ichimoku and others. You've had success in the wearable space with Bases, but just what's, maybe dig a little deeper into what's interesting to you now.
A couple themes really quickly. What's interesting for us, marketplaces of all forms. There's product marketplaces like Poshmark, the peer-to-peer one in fashion. There's service marketplaces like Lyft, pink mustaches in the cars. There are idea marketplaces, knowledge marketplaces, sort of like the Quoras of the world or HealthTap. And then there's even funding marketplaces with all of the crowdfunding platforms out there. Marketplaces are pretty exciting right now because with mobile technologies and on-demand, marketplaces are reorganizing traditional industries that used to have a lot of gatekeepers there. So as an example, we built out this whole matrix of the Uberization of the world. And we had a couple filters: high transaction value, high margin, high emotional importance of that purchase, and then most of all, high repeat usage rate. And when you map that out, suddenly you were looking at, hey, how do we get into Uber nanny, Uber sitter, Uber doctor, Uber nurse, Uber elder care, all of these things, and going down the road. So we sort of banging those out one by one. And then on top of that, IoT is really exciting, the Internet of Things. Expect every single device you own in your house to be eventually be connected. So this sounds silly, but I would love to incubate the nest of toilets. It sounds crazy, but with commodity sensors, now you can really track stuff like calories out and other things out, and that could actually lead to things like personalized subscription concierge health services, which are taking off. That's the third theme, is consumerization of health. Instead of kind of selling through hospitals, that sort of thing, consumers taking more of their health and wellness in their own hands. And that ties in well with body hacking and the quantified self movement. And then the last one, this is a little bit out there, but I'm thinking a lot about, could we use technologies for driving greater self-awareness and empathy between people? And I kind of have this hope for what Oculus could turn into. Yes, there'll be games and there'll be virtual tourism, but let's say we launched a site called Day in the Life of, and we simply asked everyone around the world to record with a GoPro, whatever it is, one day in their actual life, and you created a YouTube-like network. Theoretically, you could generate perfect empathy for someone else's viewpoint. I would love to get somebody who is actually in ISIS, or an FBI hostage negotiator, or a fireman, or a homeless person, and see, could highly immersive experiences and storytelling get people to understand each other's perspectives better. It's a little bit abstract, but that's sort of my hopes for what technology can do to bring people closer together.
And how do you find community in each of these spaces? Is it you make the community aware that that's what you're looking for, and people come to you? Do you go out and spend a lot of time on conferences and talking at conferences and panels?
Yeah, the way that you kind of build this out, or at least I found that works, is it's both talking to people who are pioneers in the field. There might not even be a company, but they just might be researching it or thinking about it or talking about it, and then also trying to formulate your own thesis in it, which could be blogging or kind of doing some guest articles and just kind of iteratively building out that thesis. But often these are much more incubatory. They're usually more out there. So you're finding, maybe repeat entrepreneurs and seeing if they have a passion in this area, or could be a researcher in MIT Media Lab that's been doing some cool things, and you build a team around them. Basis was a bit like that. I met Nadeem at Summit Series, which was a giant party in a boat, and he had this great idea and a set of DARPA patents, which he'd gotten from them. But he was 20-something, no track record in entrepreneurship, had no background to get funding, but I just believed in the idea so much, and he had this unique technology. Spent 18 months virtually incubating him. Didn't even put a dollar in. We were just trying to hand build a team around him, and we eventually poached all the right people out and made Basis a fundable company. But remember, this is before wearables was a term. People used to look at me like I was nuts. They're saying people are going to wear something on their wrist to track their activity, and then now it's commonplace. But back then, people really thought I was nuts. I had a really hard time getting the partnership. The only way to solve it was by getting credible guys out of electronic arts, out of Google Health, out of electronics, etc., to put that backable team around him.
And what did you learn? I mean, Basis, I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad you did. But what were some of the things you learned along the way? What were the course corrections? What were some of the surprises after you got it to the point where it was fundable and you built a team?
It took a lot longer than I expected. The problem is when you're out there on a limb with sort of a new thesis idea, you got to find people who believe that vision. That's pretty hard too. And then you got to get people to basically commit to joining a team before there's any even money in the deal, which is pretty hard. And I'll be the first to admit, we underestimated how hard hardware was. Hardware starts with the word hard for a reason. And even in this day and age of Kickstarter, Basis was all pre-crowdfunding, so that made it even tougher. It was an okay outcome. The Tel bought it for 130 million or whatever, but it could have been so much more. But we lost 18 months trying to actually develop and get the product out with manufacturing difficulties. It wasn't a demand issue. There was enough demand in that wait list that we'd be selling millions of bucks a month of that thing. But for every month that you were late to market, another one of those wait lists drops off. And so it was a hell of a learning that hardware, you can't truly just throw it over the fence. You really do need kind of almost a China or Asia, a manufacturing manager out there to get these things going. The other thing too, we overspec'd it. We wanted waterproof. We wanted all this. We wanted the whole kitchen sink. And if we'd simply launched it more like just Fitbit Plus or something, that might have gotten the market faster.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get to gaming, but just to continue in the wearable space a little bit, what are your observations on the iWatch, and what's that going to, is that a tectonic shift or what?
Thank God we sold Basis when we did, but when Apple launches stuff, they usually get it right pretty quickly. So it's going to definitely put the fire under everybody else to keep innovating. I think that this also does, though, good news, it drives acquisitions for other folks like the Panasonics and Sonys and others who feel they need to catch up. That's good news for startups in the space. But what I'm seeing in the wearables, the entire space for tracking apps and devices are rapidly jumping onto the coaching subscription model because they're finding that just selling devices is this horrible treadmill. And also just the app tracking alone is not compelling enough to get conversion to premium paid. Or you might get them paid $2.99 for the download once, but even if you have 100 million of those, you're done. You have no more revenue. So everyone's looking for the recurring revenue model. So what these devices should logically lead to, hopefully, is personalized coaching services powered by a combination of algorithm and human networks, right? So I see a coming land grab for the coach networks. People are going to be trying to build up these giant virtual coach networks where they're coaching you through a mobile app. And part of it's synchronous, but most of it, I think for the millennial generation and the younger, it's actually chat-based. So the interface might look more like WhatsApp, but you're getting daily motivation and daily kind of recommendations from your actual human coach you might have talked to once or twice initially on FaceTime or something, but you have that sort of human-powered network that's keeping you on the device or on the app, and you're gladly paying $4 to $10 a month for that.
And then on the gaming space, obviously you've made a lot of investments. Are you bullish on gaming? Are you still active in gaming?
I have definitely been interested still in gaming because every single company I work with now, marketplace especially, are asking for gamification designers. So one of the big things is gamification used to be sort of this fad term, and then it went through the trough of disillusionment, but it's now just a toolkit for behavioral analytics and incentive design. And so all companies really believe in it. They're trying to use it. So I guess I'm still investing in gaming in the sense that gaming is making its way to every industry now. Learning, financial services, investing, all that sort of thing. But for traditional games, you know, you've got some great companies out there like Super Evil Megacorp or Christians at Now that are doing the traditional, you know, hardcore, midcore on the tablet. I think I'm doing less of those unless they're chasing new platforms. My whole premise on gaming originally was whenever something new like tablets or smartwatches or social watches, the EAs of the world are always slow to get there first because they would probably just try to port an existing property over. That's never as good as a designed for native game from somebody new. So the new hopefuls now are going to be glass, and then obviously on the wrist, and then I'm really, really excited for what VR could bring. So could there be an NG Moco of, you know, Oculus? There probably already are several chasing that, but that's probably where the excitement would be these newer platforms.
You alluded to this earlier. Have you looked within your partnership at whether you've done better on investments that created consensus or dispersion and were very controversial?
I bet you probably did this analysis too and found the same thing we did. Some of the best outcomes, at least one or two people hated it, like drop dead, I don't want to do this deal. Anything that everyone liked probably ended up being a wipeout or at best sort of an iterative return. And so I found that with myself. That's why I kind of say I don't think I know what I really don't know anymore, because anything you think is a surefire, you know, can't lose thing, craters. And sometimes just these little flyer seed checks in something like Lumosity turns out to be like the best company you've ever invested in, even though there's no category or something like that. So I think we have a new rule now is we want at least two partners who are equally passionate about it, but we want to see at least one or two people just hate it outright, because that's a great sign of beta. You don't create disruption without dissent and disagreement about what's being shaken up, right? You're defying conventional logic by reason, so by definition. So it should be polarizing from the start.
Yeah, we found the same thing.
Yeah.
That reversion to the mean is not a great thing in the venture business.
Exactly.
Like if everybody's happy, then
Something's
it's not pushing hard enough.
Right.
Yeah. Jay, when do we want to do questions? Do you want to do that now? Do you want to talk for a bit longer? Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we do that? Anybody have anything else? I think that covered my questions. What questions do we have from the audience for Tim? Yes. I'll let you point people.
Oh, sure.
I don't have to manage that.
So, big question that I found myself talking about a lot of other startups in the community. Everywhere I go, it's like the number one thing that everybody wants to talk about is that when we talk to VCs, the number one thing we're hearing is come back when you have traction, or where's your traction? And is the VC's role, has it ever been to look at a great idea and say, let's build a business to help you get traction for this potentially great business? Or is the VC's job to say, let's look at traction and then take it to the next level? Because I think what it's leading to, and I think for a lot of us who are sitting on the outside looking in, you see almost like it seems like a cowboy mentality of like rodeo, like looking for the Snapchats and trying to lasso and hang on for the ride, right? And so what is the new VC role in delivering the early stage?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. I'll be the first to admit, a lot of us investors, we are herd animals, right? Like we look for themes that are easily digestible, like, oh, it's Snapchat for blind people or whatever it is, you know, and then if you missed Twitch, it's like, let's go get Twitch number 2. And so you're gonna get a lot of that, but to answer your question, it's a bit of both, the former and the latter, but it's based upon the relationship. if I worked with you before, maybe you were at one of my prior companies, and you had that X factor and I believe in you, I will build a team around you and take that early stage bet. But that's a talent bet based on chemistry and relationship and trust that came from years of working together. The other side, that's why if basically they don't know you from before and you're kind of a relative stranger, they're going to default to traction. Traction is the cop-out to basically say, wait till you've got tons of hockey stick and then I'm going to try to bid up and try to be a part of that beauty contest when you have 10 term sheets. Because VCs often, we hate to say truly no because you don't want to lose the deal if it tracks later, so you're trying to always leave the door open. That's why it's so hard to get definitive no's from VCs. They always want to hang around the hoop, as we call it. The good news is now there is AngelList, there are super angels, there's micro VCs who will take more of that risk, and they don't necessarily need to see the same level of traction. The only downside is try not to get too underfunded because the Series A crunch is definitely real. Like getting a tweener state of traction is one of the most important things of all. And if you only raise like 250K or something, that is almost by definition going to get you to a tweener state where your angels aren't set up to bridge you, but the VCs will just look at it and say, not enough traction, come back for more. That puts entrepreneurs in a really tough spot, and I have a lot of empathy for people in that situation. So try to get a little more gas in the tank. Even if it means talking the angels into a bit more. You know, the difference between sort of 2 million seed versus $500,000 is pretty big when you're trying to get product market fit. And these days, the definitions are all screwed up. What's a seed or what's an A? I don't even know anymore. I've seen 4 million convertible note party rounds that were seeds, and I've seen like 1.5 million priced A's, and it's all over the map. You might have seen people.
No, I think that's very consistent with what I'd say. Try to understand I think it's prudent to, as you're going into an endeavor, try to get a sense of what is traction. What is traction for a set of investors that you'd be interested in? And many of us would love to meet you at that stage when you're not asking us to, make that investment, make that commitment, and give you that feedback. Because our job is to meet great people as early as possible, even if it's before it's really right for us to fund. But you can make an impression and ask questions and get some input on that. Then the question is the feedback reasonable? Can you accomplish that on a reasonable seed funding? But at least if your seed funding, in all likelihood, is going to get you someplace where that group of investors would likely make a commitment.
Yeah.
So before this discussion, I emailed 4 friends who were venture capitalists, and I said, do you think we're in a tech bubble right now? 2 said yes, 2 said no. Do you guys want to break the tie?
I think I found, having lived through a couple bubbles now, it's not uniform. There's always a bubble somewhere, and there's always a cold dead spot somewhere. So what's the way to describe it? A topology that's got certain peaks and some valleys. So for example, in security or semiconductors, it's stone cold in some areas, whereas in, say, food delivery, it might be a bit of a bubble. So it's never uniform. And even great companies, well, actually a lot of wonderful companies get built when the bubble pops too. So I'm never so dismissive as to say, oh, it's a bubble, let's just sit on the beach. Because there are always either new spots that are not common categories yet you can go build, or there's dead spots that are bound for kind of innovation again, right? So I guess I've just learned not to dismiss categories outright.
Yeah, and I just add that, there's the externalities like the Federal Reserve pumping money in, and that creates a stock market and I think, in some areas there's inflated valuations in the stock market. On the flip side, you look at what value is being created, are there new platforms, are disruptive things happening, are there new areas, and I think it's absolutely, maybe they're bubbles, but the opportunity right now is just absolutely massive with the move to mobility. Health is just getting there. It's a complicated mess, but it will get there because there are a lot of other complicated messes that have been either elegantly or not elegantly managed by new technology platforms. In the enterprise, that was dead until it wasn't, and now it's taking off, and you've got 10 or 15 years of non-investment by big incumbents, creating just a huge white space not white space, it's sort of a vacuum of need for companies. So I think there are bubbles in valuation in certain places, but the real value creation I was telling Tim, I just moved back to San Francisco from the suburbs, and all of a sudden I realized these nice-to-have apps, when I was living in the suburbs, those are lifesavers. Like, I would pay a lot of, well, I mean, Uber is a lifesaver if you're living in the city. So there are things being created now that have inflated valuations, but, you know, maybe they're worth it because they actually deliver on the promise.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for the discussion, which is really interesting. And the question is about the digital content market. So during the last several years, we saw like around 10 players